Hello everyone, this is the 5th Epical Revelation Fellowship. I'm Reverend Dr. Roger Paul. And tonight we are going to study paper 66, the Planetary Prince of Urantia. Good paper. And that starts on page 741.1 or paper 6601. And let's say a little prayer. We'll get started. Father, thank you for bringing us together tonight and enable us to study these papers together. Please you watch over this meeting and open our hearts and our minds that we might learn something and share it with others. We thank you for this opportunity to learn and to share, and we give you praise in your Son's name, Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. Amen. Okay. Paper 66, Planetary Prince of Urantia. This is the paper. Okay. And let's start out with Millie tonight.
I'll try it. Planetary Prince of Urantia. The advent of a Lenondak sun on the average world signifies that the will, the ability of choice, the path of eternal survival,
the ability to choose.
The ability has achieved. I don't see that word. The path to survival has developed in the mind of primitive man. But on Urantia, the planetary prince arrived almost 500,000 years after the appearance of human will.
Okay, so normally on a planet, as soon as human will springs its head up, in other words, the first decision, sole decision, primitive man makes, normally that's when the planetary prince comes. But on our planet, being an experimental planet, it was almost 500,000 years after the appearance of human will. So for 500,000 years after the appearance of will, there were basically reproduction of the primitive men going down through time, through the Ice Age. And so the planetary prince didn't come until late in our planet. So, okay.
Hey, Roger.
Hey, Roger, you were breaking up. It's kind of hard to... Did you notice that, Rodney?
Yeah, it sounds like you're way far away.
Well, that's not good. That's a Skype problem.
Well,
I can hardly hear you. Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Let me redial everybody then.
Now I can hear you.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah.
Did it clear up? Oh, okay.
But you're right here, honey, on the...
Yeah, well, I'll try to speak louder. Okay.
It's pretty
I
tight.
had a question for you, Roger.
Yeah.
Notice that they used the word will. Remember those beings that are only concerned with will, they write down? So, I've asked this question before, but is it the same thing that they're referring to, the word will, is the ability to choose the path of eternal survival? Remember those beings that are just concerned with will?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay.
It has to do with choosing eternal survival. In other words, are choosing a God-led path, basically. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question.
Yeah.
And it probably will answer it soon. But that world will be 500,000 years later, getting our planetary prince.
Well, let's go to the next paragraph and.
Being an experimental
Yes.
system, we already had an unusual event happen with the 6 colored races, and an event on Infanta as well.
Yeah, well, that's what comes up next. Normally, the 6 colored races appear over a period of time, right, in different families, 6 different families. But in our planet, all 6 races appeared in one family, and that's what this next paragraph is talking about. Why
that's what I figured. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go on to the next. Rodney, you want to take the next one?
All right, Roger. About 500,000 years ago,
Mesopotamia was about the center of world population.
Okay, so several things happened during this period of time, and this may be why the Planetary prince did not come for 500,000 years. First, the six colored races arrived, concurrent with when he came, okay? And at that time, there were 500 million primitive human beings. So if the Planetary prince came when Andon Infanta first made the first will decision, there wouldn't be a whole lot for them to do, would they? Because there weren't there weren't any primitive human beings to teach. Make sense? And that took about 500 million years of reproduction and that sort of thing for the Sangic races to appear. So that's probably why he waited to come 500,000 years later. So by the time he arrived, there were 500 million primitive beings on the planet. So that gave his staff and the headquarters plenty of opportunity to teach and help these primitive beings come into a more evolved state of living. That makes sense?
Yeah, okay. I know I just woke up, but I don't. Why was he late coming? Do you know?
I think it was because there weren't any primitive beings for them to teach. You know, the Caligasser 100 comes to teach the primitive beings how to socialize, about religion, all the things we're going to talk about tonight. Okay,
Yeah,
but there weren't any of those to teach. When 500,000 years earlier, there was only Andon Infanta.
So is that a standard thing between on the planets? I mean, like when Anton and Fonda became were the first will creature, are there usually multiple will creatures?
Probably so. That happens concurrently.
Okay,
like,
under our circumstances,
yeah, in our circumstances, it was with one couple, and from that one couple, pretty much the whole population evolved.
So it's saying, what is that, 500 million people?
Yeah, 500 million is 500 million people. So there were.
That's like a million.
Well, over 500,000 years, 500 million people is not that much because they marry, they reproduce. You're talking generation after generation after generation of these primitive people, right? So it just expands over and over and over. It's like taking a penny. If you add a penny and double it, and then you double it again, it don't take long to get millions of dollars, right? It's the same principle. You take two people and they have a baby, and those two people, they have a couple babies, they have a couple more, they have a couple more, and before you know it, we got 500 million people, right?
Well, it says that they were on Earth at the time of the prince's arrival, so they had 500 million primitive human beings here at that time.
Right.
It wasn't like that was all there was between 500 million years ago.
No. No, this is generation after generation after generation, thousands of years, 500 million years.
500,000 years. I said million too, but
yeah,
500,000
years, right. 500,000 years. I'm getting my millions and my billions. Okay.
Did you understand that, Robert?
No, I do understand, but it still doesn't. I mean, I wonder how many people in an average world, primitive humans are in an average world when the prince arrives.
Well, in an average world, Rodney, there may be thousands of primitive people just making will decisions concurrently. That's what I'm saying. And that is not the way it happened on our planet, right? Okay.
Okay.
All right, Tim, would you take the next one, please?
Section 1, Prince Caligastia. Caligastia was a Leonardic son number 9,344 of the secondary order. He was experienced in the administration of the affairs of the local universe in general, and during later ages with the management of the local system of Satania in particular.
A couple things I want to point out here. First, see the number of Caligastia, 9,344? So there's a lot of Lenonidec sons, right? All right, and it says here he was experiencing administration of the local universe affairs. So he had lots and lots of experience managing the local universe of Satania. Okay, and that was probably millions of years he was doing this. So he was not new on the block by any stretch of the imagination, right?
But he was also created by Michael and Devadon and the local universe Mother Spirit. That was their son, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. Okay, let's keep going. Dear.
Prior to the reign of Lucifer in Satania, Caligastia had been attached to the Council of the Life Carrier Advisors on Jerusalem. Lucifer elevated Caligastia to a position on his personal staff, and he acceptably filled 5 successive assignments of honor and trust.
So he had 5 previous assignments that he did exactly what he was supposed to. Another thing that's interesting here is that he was also assigned to the Life Carrier Advisors on Jerusalem. So he was very familiar with what went on with the life implantation on a new planet, right? So he was very experienced with the administration, and he knew exactly how things were supposed to be run. Caligastia was very early sought a commission as Planetary Prince, but repeatedly when his request came up for approval in the constellation councils, it would fail to receive the assent of the constellation fathers. Caligastia seemed especially desirous of being sent as a planetary ruler to a decimal or life modification world. That's ours. His petition had several times been disapproved before he was finally assigned to Urantia. So he kept applying for every time a life decimal planet would come up, he'd apply for the position of Planetary Prince. And they kept turning him down. Finally, he got what he wanted. He got Urantia.
Hey Roger, when they mentioned the word constellation fathers, they're talking about the Urantia sons, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. And they reside where, Tim? Do you remember?
At the moment,
Adentia.
no, but it's easy to look up.
Yeah, it's Adentia.
I think that's paper 35.
Yeah, it's Adentia.
That's correct.
Okay. Millie, I think you're next.
Caligastia went forth from Jerusalem to his trust of world dominion with an
Enviable
record of loyalty and devotion to the welfare of the universe of his origin and sojourn, notwithstanding a certain characteristic restlessness coupled with a tendency to disagree with the established order in certain minor matters.
So he had a history of kind of being a little rebellious against the institutions of the universe already. You know, he had a tendency to disagree with the way things were running. He thought he had a better way of doing it all the time, right? Okay. And a lot of humans do the same thing, right? All right. Rodney, would you take the next one?
I was present at Jerusalem when the brilliant Caligastia departed from the system capital. No prince of the planets ever embarked upon a career of world rulership with a richer preparatory
There you go.
experience or better prospects thinking Caligastia that event that they 1.5 million years ago. One thing is certain, as I executed my assignment of putting the narrative of that event on the broadcast of the local universe, I never for one moment entertained even in the slightest degree any idea that this noble Onadic would so shortly betray the sacred trust, planetary custody, and will horribly stain the fair name of his exalted order of universalship. I really regarded Urantia as being among the 5 or 6 most fortunate planets that are Symphonia, and that it was to have such an experienced, brilliant, and original mind at the helm of world affairs. I did not then comprehend that Caligastia was insidiously falling in love with himself. I did not then so fully understand the subtleties of personality pride.
So basically, think about this. Caligastia was going on a career as a planetary prince, one of the most exalted.
What?
I can't hear you, Roger.
And
What's going on?
Hey, Roger, we can't hear you.
Okay, let me reboot and see if I can get a better connection here.
Are you still out there, Rodney?
yes,
Okay. It just went silent for a second. I wonder what happened.
I heard some papers.
Huh? Yeah, I got a good connection. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you a lot better now.
Okay, well, I can't do that. There can't be up there and down there too.
So Roger, this I can't help but think of there was a Greek god that fell in love with himself, right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's exactly what Caligastia did. He had this position of ultimate importance. He was going to be prince of a planet, okay? And so he, I feel like I'm yelling now.
No, you sound better.
Okay.
That was scary listening to Rodney reading it the first person.
Yeah, was it?
So anyway, he basically had this position of authority that anybody would be envious of, okay? And the problem came in is because of all this authority and all this basic pride in himself, he fell in love with himself. And that's what they're talking about, this personality pride. He became so prideful, he thought the way he wanted to do things is more important than everyone else. So when the Lucifer rebellion cropped up, he was ready to jump on board, right? All right.
So I had a question, Roger.
Yeah.
So it's okay to love yourself and to like yourself, but when you use pride to think you're better than other people, then it becomes a problem?
That's exactly right.
Okay, thank you.
That's
Well
exactly
said,
right.
well
Tim.
said.
Yeah. We have to keep ourselves in check. When you start to put yourself above other people, right? This is part of what Jesus came to teach us, the fatherhood of God and the what? The brotherhood of man. So when we stop putting the brotherhood of man above ourselves, then we run into problems. Okay?
He also taught that pride was the biggest obstacle.
Biggest obstacle, that's right. The big head syndrome, right? I think I'm smarter than everybody else. Right?
And wasn't that also the fall of Lucifer too, was his pride?
It was that's exactly right, Tim. That's his problem too. Tim, would you take the next one?
Section 2, the Prince's Staff. The planetary prince of Urantia was not sent out on his mission alone, but was accompanied by the usual corps of assistants and administrative helpers.
That's right. Okay, and we're going to talk about them, right?
At the head of this group was Delegastia, the associate assistant of the planetary prince. Delegastia was also a secondary Leonondex son, being number 319,407 of that order. He ranked as an assistant at the time of his assignment as Caligastia's associate.
So Delegastia was an assistant, ranked as assistant. Notice his number, 319,000. There's a whole bunch of those, right? And so he was ranking as an assistant at the time of Caligastia, and when he was assigned to him. And so basically, Delegastia became Caligastia's assistant, or second in command, right?
Sorry.
Hi!
The planetary staff
That was a lovely
included a
title.
large number of angelic cooperators and a host of other celestial beings assigned to advance the interest and promote the welfare of the human races. But from your standpoint, the most interesting group of all were were the corporal members of the prince's staff, sometimes referred to as the Calagasta 100. Now remember, when the Calagasta 100 came, there was a whole angelic corps that came with them, right? Right, so they weren't the only ones that came. Calagasta came and the 100 came, but there were a whole bunch of angels were assigned with them.
So when we say angels, we're really talking about seraphim, right? Because those are the only angels.
Yeah.
They're not Seconophim, they're not Supernaphim.
They're seraphim, that's right.
They're seraphim, and seraphim are known as angels, and they're usually female, according to our standards.
Yeah, now that's not entirely true that it was just seraphim, because there was a corps of archangels assigned also.
Because the next question I had was, well, it also says that they had citizens from Jerusalem, so what are they labeled? So we'll have to read on to find out.
That's the Calagasta 100.
Okay, so those are seraphim, basically.
No. The Calagasta 100, we're going to find this out later in the paper, were ascendant mortals that had gone through all 7 of the mansion worlds and become Jerusalem citizens, but they had not fused with their adjusters yet.
Okay, that's the 100, correct?
That's the 100, that's right. So they were ascendant mortals, they weren't angels. Okay. There were a whole bunch of angels assigned to the planet with them, but the Calagasta 100 were not angels.
Right, because it says a large number of angelic corps,
Yeah. All right.
So you have the angelic, and then you have the 100.
Right.
Okay, so these are 2 separate groups.
Yeah, 2 separate groups.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
These 100 rematerialized members of the prince's staff were chosen by Calagastia from over 785,000 ascendant citizens of Jerusalem who volunteered for embarkation on the Urantia adventure. Each one of the chosen 100 was from a different planet, and none of them were from Urantia.
There you go. So these were from a bunch of different planets. None of them were from originated in Urantia, because you know if you leave a planet, you don't go back for a whole millennium. Okay, but they were chosen from 785,000 ascendant citizens. So apparently there were at least 785,000 ascendant citizens on Jerusalem had made it all the way to Jerusalem without fusing with their thought adjusters, because if you fuse with your thought adjuster, you're not allowed to go on this mission. Okay. Also, there's an interesting thing in the very first sentence of this, and that is these 100 were rematerialized. Okay, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the paper, but it's kind of just like out of Ancient Aliens, when they talk about aliens coming by and taking the DNA and putting it in another body. Basically, that's what they did. They took the life plasm, or the DNA, from the population that was already here. They were volunteers, and they gave their DNA, and they created bodies from this DNA pattern of the people that were here, so that they would resemble the people that were living here at that time, right? But they were rematerializing. Their consciousness and their soul was original. They were just put in these new bodies. Okay?
So hey Roger, these ascendant citizens basically started out like we did. First on Urantia, they went through the ascension career and eventually reached Jerusalem and were pretty much qualified, correct?
Yes.
And then they were chosen by
they were probably waiting to fuse with their thought adjusters on Jerusalem when this opportunity came. And because when they were chosen, their thought adjusters were detached from them. They did not come back with them. All right? And this is a slide of the Calagasta 100, and it says the selection of the Calagasta 100, Jerusalem about 500,000 years ago. And that's the paragraph we just read. Am I up? The Jerusalemite volunteers were brought by seraphic transport, just like if you died, they brought them back, from the system capital to Urantia. And upon arrival, they were held in seraphim until they could be provided with personality forms of the dual nature of special planetary service. Literal bodies consisting of flesh and blood, but also attuned to the life circuits of the system. This is very, very important. They had the DNA of the local citizenship, right? In their bodies, the flesh and blood, just like everyone else. But they were also attuned to the life circuits of the system. And it's the life circuits of the system that allowed them, along with the tree of life, to live indefinitely. In other words, their body did not break down. In other words, they could have still been here if that was the case. Okay? So they regenerate, and basically they're flesh and blood like us, with the exception of having the life circuit. Right? And we know when rebellion started, the life circuit was what? Stop. That's right. Cut off from us. Right?
Hey Roger, they mentioned the word in seraphim. Can you explain what that means versus seraphic transport?
Yeah, well, it's the same thing. They're both exactly the same thing. And here's a picture of it. Basically, they're surrounded by a seraphim angel. Okay, and these seraphim angel can transport hundreds of beings at a time, even thousands of them, right? So when they're in seraphim, the seraphim literally engulfs all of them and takes off for the planet. And he stays on the planet until their bodies are prepared and they're ready to put back into a human form. What are they doing during this time? They're asleep. They're totally unconscious. They don't even know what's happening. Oh, here we go again. Okay?
So Roger, you mentioned the tree of life.
Yes.
Was it brought here at that time?
From Urantia.
From Urantia, yeah.
It was brought here?
Yes, it was a shrub from Urantia.
It was brought here. They don't tell us how it was brought, right?
But it was brought this time?
It was brought at this time. They could have started it out from Urantia 500,000 years earlier and sent it by a flying saucer. We don't know, right?
Maybe it was UPS.
I don't think it was UPS. But
they also mentioned that, if human beings were to partake of the tree of life, nothing would happen to them.
That's right.
It was only good for what? The material sons and daughters, the Adam and Eve?
That's right. But remember, the tree of life was a material plant, right? So we know that seraphim cannot transport material beings, can they?
No.
They can only transport souls, okay? So more than likely...
Actually transported in some type of vehicle.
That's exactly right, Rodney. It was probably transported in some type of vehicle. And it could have been some type of vehicle like we see as UFOs, right? We just do not know. But we know that it arrived about the same time as the Calabasas 100. Now, the Urantia fathers, or the Most Highs, knew that this is going to happen, in 500,000 years or whenever they were assigned to come. So they could have started the plan out 500,000 years earlier and transported in the slow transport to get here. We just don't know, right? But more than likely it was some sort of vehicle that's used to do this. All right. Who's up?
It's too bad they don't tell us.
Yeah. Well, if they told us everything, we'd have too big a book, probably.
That would only be a couple of sentences.
Yeah. Millie, I think you're up.
Roger, do you think the tree of life still exists?
No, I don't.
Not here.
The reason I say that, not even a twig left to it, Millie, is the first one was destroyed completely. Okay? The second one, which came with Adam and Eve, basically was used up over a period of time by the descendants that were loyal of Adam and Eve. And they say that it was destroyed too. So there's
and
no...
then eventually didn't it flood?
Yes, it did. That's what I'm
correct.
saying. both of them were destroyed over a period of time. So the thing of it is, if Adam and Eve would have stayed loyal to their trust, that they would have been notified of the sinking of the second garden, right? And they would have made preparations and moved the tree. But they were banned from the tree, okay, when they defaulted. So they were not allowed to take the shrub with them, all right? So it's probably sank into the sea.
Yeah, one thing about this amazing revelation is that everything is just so spread out, you know?
Yeah, I do. All right, Millie, I think you're up again.
Okay. These 100 materialized members of the
Millie, the next
staff.
paragraph. Next
Where it
paragraph.
shows,
Next
is that
paragraph.
wrong?
Yeah, sometime
Yes.
before.
Sometimes.
Sometime before they arrive.
Sometimes hence,
No.
before the arrival of these 100 Jerusalem citizens, the two supervising life carriers, residents on Urantia, having previously perfected their plans, petitioned Jerusalem and Urantia for permission to transplant the life plasm of 100 selected survivors of the Anton and Fedora stock into the material bodies of the
To be projected.
material bodies to be projected for the corporal members of the princess staff. This requisite was granted on Jerusalem and approved on the indenture.
Okay, so basically, before the 100 came to Urantia, okay, the life carriers had to petition to Jerusalem and Urantia, right? That's the chain of command, for the permission to transplant the life plasm from the volunteers for 100 selected survivors in Anda and Fonda into the projected corporal members of the princess staff. In other words, move the life plasm into these bodies that's been prepared for them, right? And that was granted on Jerusalem and approved by Urantia. So even the life carriers could not have done this without the approval of Jerusalem and Urantia. Okay. Let's see if I can get this to work. Okay. Rodney, I think you're up.
Accordingly, 50 males and 50 females of the Anton and Fonta posterity, representing the survival of the best strains of that unique race, were chosen by the life carriers. With one or two exceptions, these Antonite contributors to the advancement of the race were strangers to one another. They were assembled from wide separated places by coordinate adjuster direction and terrific guidance at the threshold of the planetary headquarters of the Prince. Here the 100 human subjects were given into the hands of the highly skilled volunteer commission from Avalon, who directed the material extraction of a portion of the life plasm of these Anton descendants. This living material was then transferred to the material bodies constructed for the use of the 100 Jerusalemite members of the princess staff. Meantime, these newly arrived citizens of the system capital were held in the sleep of seraphic transport.
Okay, so basically this kind of reminds you of the story of the gray UFOs, the grays and the UFOs, doesn't it? Because there was volunteers from a planet called Avalon. Okay, that's a close neighbor to us, Avalon is. And these volunteers came and extracted the material from the 100 volunteer human beings that gave their life plasm. So it kind of reminds you of the UFOs coming down and taking life out of these people, putting them in these artificially created bodies that were both human and connected to the system circuit, right? And they put the DNA back into these bodies. Now, then these bodies were ready. So at that point, the volunteers from Avalon had to take the transported souls of these individuals and put them back into these new bodies. Make sense?
So, hey Roger, this isn't the invasion of the body snatchers, is it?
No.
They didn't take like Primitive Man and
No, but all these TV shows you see on about aliens taking human DNA and animal DNA and experimenting, it reminds you of that, doesn't it? It really does.
So they pretty much, you kind of broken up on the one-up we just read. So they kind of just took the life plasm and then created the material body and then put them in there?
That's right. That's exactly right. Okay.
Is Diane with us?
Yeah, she is.
Roger, they, you know, it was primitive, obviously, very primitive.
Yes.
And I doubt seriously that they built a really nice hospitals, you might say, or clinics for this to happen.
No,
This
it was
material. It seems to me that perhaps this crew from Avalon brought their own facility.
They probably did, Rodney, and it could have been in a flying saucer. It could, yeah, it could have been.
Specialized and sterilized.
Yeah, well, it could have been in any kind of transport vehicle or anything along that line where they could do this, because 100 individuals is not that many. So they could have taken these volunteered humans and, you know, ran them through one at a time into some kind of vehicle that does this, right? That's sterile and that sort of thing, and then they just transported it to the waiting bodies. I'm sure they had a facility for that too.
Because in other words, what I'm saying is, I don't think they would have done this in a grass hut.
No, not likely.
Well, so many of the UFO sightings, they've seen huge UFOs.
Yeah.
So I imagine they would have an incredibly...
Yeah, like a mothership.
A mothership, exactly.
Yeah.
So probably it took place in something like that, where they already had the facilities intact and everything. So.
Okay, Tim, would you take the next one?
These transactions, together with the literal creation of specific bodies for the Caligastia, special bodies for the Caligastia 100, gave origin to numerous legends, many of which subsequently became confused with the later traditions concerning the planetary installation of Adam and Eve.
So this transaction, because it was so unique and they learned about it and told about it, and it got confused with the stories of the later, 39,000 years ago with Adam and Eve, right? So, but there were two different things. Okay.
I mean, Adam and Eve was only like 35,000 years ago.
Or 35,000, whatever long it was. Yeah, 35,000. I keep getting that date.
900,000, you said.
No.
It was 37,000
37,500 years.
You know,
Yeah.
perhaps what they're talking about here is like the story in the Bible of taking a rib from Adam to create Eve.
Yeah, that could be, Rodney, but it also could be what happened with Adam and Eve. When Adam and Eve were brought to the planet, they were reconstructed much in the same way, okay? Because their souls were brought here and they were given DNA from the local citizens and given brand new bodies, but their bodies were about 8 foot tall, right? So they were specially constructed bodies for the DNA of the humans plus the circuit again, right? Because Adam and Eve would have been encircuited. Make sense? Because they were loyal. All right, so here we go.
The entire transaction of repersonalization from the time of the arrival of the seraphic transports, bearing the 100 Jerusalem volunteers until they became conscious, threefold beings of the realm consumed exactly 10 days.
So it took 10 days for these beings from Avalon to do this, right?
Hey Roger, I hate to interrupt you, but just for a few seconds,
Yeah.
you went completely silent. Did you hear that, Rodney?
Yeah, but I said, hey, is there anyone out there? No one.
Yeah, that's what I did too. I said, Rodney, can you hear me?
Okay.
That was weird.
Let me read
That was
out
weird.
everybody, because this is getting ridiculous.
Yeah.
All right.
Probably those guys from Avalon.
Some people need
Okay, I'm back.
to Millersville, Robbinsville.
Okay. Let me see that here. That whole call failed. I'm just using group call and turning the video back.
Okay.
Well, I got 10, but I didn't get anybody else. Yeah, I lost him again too.
Maybe you can start calling some.
This is Scott. Sorry at home. I'll get everybody back as soon as I can. I don't see no one. Nellie, you back?
I'm back.
Let me see if I can add
Hello.
that
I'm back. Yep.
in. Everybody back?
Yeah, I can hear you much better now, Roger.
All right, well, you won't think that was walk away.
When he's talking to you, he's right over here by the microphone. Now he's going back to the podium.
You sound great now. I can hear you.
Now I'm totally lost. Who's
Much better.
Did you just read it?
I think I just read, yeah.
Okay.
I did. I just read this.
Okay, 3, Dalmatia, the city of the prince. The headquarters of the Planetary Prince was situated in the Persian Gulf region of those days, in the district corresponding to later Mesopotamia. And this is a picture of Mesopotamia, basically. And
Is that in Iran?
yeah, this is probably, I think this is the coast of Iran. But right in here is where we're talking about, right on the Persian Gulf. You see Sumner, and this is the old biblical times. This is the cities then. And this is the cities now, Mesopotamia. Now it's right here. And you see this Kuwait, right? Iran, and Iraq. That's the 3 areas we're talking about, right on the coast of the Persian Gulf. Okay? So that's a picture of both this is the old time picture, the cities during that time, how it was divided up, and now this is today. Okay? So you can look at that at your leisure.
Near Kuwait.
Near Kuwait. That's right. But let me go back. Well, there is one thing I want to say. It's interesting because this is where the 2 twin rivers come together. They talk about many places in the Bible. And the area that sank into the ocean, or the Persian Gulf, was probably right in here. Okay? That's what we speculate, anyway. Because we know it sank, okay, into the Gulf. So somewhere out there in the Gulf are the tablets and some of the writings from this period. So one of these days, some scuba diver is going to go down in there and find ruins of Dalmatia. And they will find writings of that period of time. Of course, we probably won't be able to decipher it because it would be totally different from anything today, right? But the 7 rules of the Father are out there in the Gulf, because we'll find that later on in this paper. Okay, did you just read it?
I did.
Okay, so it's my turn. The climate and the landscape in the Mesopotamia of those times were in every way favorable to the undertakings of the prince's staff and their assistants, very different from conditions which have sometimes since prevailed. It was necessary to have such a favoring climate as a part of the natural environment designed to induce primitive Urantians to make certain initial advances in culture and civilization. The one great task of those ages was to transform man from a hunter to a herder, with the hope that later on he would evolve into a peace-loving, home-abiding farmer. That was the plan. All right. So thank goodness for the farmers that's left, right? All right. Millie, I think you're up here.
Let me see. Do I have my street on? Yes. The headquarters of the Planetary Prince on Urantia was typical of such stations on a young and developing sphere. The nucleus of the prince's septum was a very simple and beautiful
city.
A beautiful city enclosed within a wall 40 feet high. The world center of culture was named Dalmatia in the honor of Delegacia.
So Delegacia being the second assistant to Caligasta, they named the city after Delegacia, okay? And I'm sure they related that to the local population when they came to visit and stuff. Because both Caligasta and Delegacia was not visible to the inhabitants there. Now they were to the 100, but not the inhabitants that came to visit there. So,
Roger, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Number one, I wonder why they had to build the wall so darn high.
They tell us in a minute.
Very high.
Keep out animals.
Well, what else I'm interested in was, holy cow, I wonder what they used to build the wall back then.
Brick.
That's interesting.
It was a brick wall.
It was brick.
It was brick, and it was built to keep out wild animals and invading tribes of humans. You know, during that period.
And that took a long time to build.
It did.
Yeah, really.
But during that period of time, the tribes of humans, one tribe would invade another to get wives, and they were cannibals, so they would eat them. So they built the wall to make sure that everyone within the city was protected from animals and other humans. Okay? So you have to remember, this was a very barbaric period of time. People were warring constantly. They were stealing each other's goods and wives and animals and everything.
Well, that's what I mean. Primitive man was not a labor field.
No, but the ones that came to the city learned how to do these skills, Rodney. That's the whole point.
Pardon me?
The ones that came to the city learned these skills from the Caligasta 100. And it probably took 100 years to build the wall. You know, it probably did. Just like the Great Wall of China, it probably took thousands of years to build the Great Wall of China, but they built it. Okay? And this one was the first one using brick. And we're going to find that out later on in this.
Okay.
So, hey, Roger, the corporeal staff is the Jerusalemite volunteers, correct?
Right.
Okay.
They are. Okay. Tim, I think you're up next.
I think I am.
Oh, sorry, Rodney. I forgot. Yeah, you are.
It's okay. The city was laid out in 10 subdivisions with the headquarters mansions of the 10 councils of corporal staff situated at the centers of these subdivisions. Centermost in the city was the Temple of the Unseen Father, the administrative headquarters of the prince and his associates was arranged in 12 chambers immediately grouped about the temple itself.
And this is interesting because this is a picture of it. Okay? And basically, if we look here, it's got the headquarters mansions of the 10 heads of the 10 subdivisions, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Okay, and then in the center was the administrative headquarters, and then it had 12 sections around it. But this was where the temple of the unseen Father was. Okay, and what was inside the temple, in the center of the temple of the unseen Father? The tree of life.
The planetary.
Tree of life.
Yeah, the tree of life. So it was well protected.
Wait, what was in the center?
The tree of life.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it was well protected, and then surrounding that is the headquarters and the basically home of the staff of each one of these headquarters, right?
And the planetary prince would be in the temple, correct?
Right.
And
Yeah.
he was unseen to
He
primitive
was
man at that
unseen,
time.
okay? And surrounding all this, you'll see up here it says a 40-foot tall brick wall. All right? And that surrounded it. And then outside the wall was multiple gatherings of humans, basically, little subdivisions type things. So you could say this is like having Atlanta and the perimeter, and then all the homes out in the perimeter, so we live out there somewhere, right? Outside the wall.
The bedroom community.
Bedroom community, that's right.
That's an incredible slide you got there.
Yeah, it's pretty good. You want to look at it later. Tim, I think you're up.
The building of Dalmatia. The building of Dalmatia were all buildings, the buildings of Dalmatia were all one story except the council headquarters, which these 2 stories, and the central temple of the Father of all, which was small, but 3 stories in height.
So the Father's temple was 3 stories, right? And the council headquarters were 2.
2 stories.
Yeah, but all the rest of them were 1-story buildings, right? And it's really funny. What's really funny to me is since this wall was made of brick, I'm sure sometime in the future someone will find partial pieces of that wall, probably underwater, right?
Yeah, and for a building to be 3 stories tall, makes you wonder what they used for floor joists back then.
Probably wood, more than likely.
And flooring.
Yeah, more than likely it's probably wood.
Well, see,
Unless the Calagasso 100 had some building techniques that we don't know about.
So do you think primitive man actually learned, because in those ancient alien series, you hear about how the construction is so unique and amazing. Do you think that was taught, those skills, to those people?
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really do. I really think most of the stuff, even in Egypt and places like that, a lot of the things that you see in the drawings and carvings and all that was probably leftovers from Dalmatia, more than likely. Because in Egypt, in the pyramids, they have carvings of beings that are like 8 foot tall and things. And they could only come from two things, the giant race, which is green, or they could have been descendants from Dalmatia. The Dalmatians were probably about 8 foot tall too. So, you see these and you see the elongated heads and masks like birds and things like that. I think that's all leftovers from the stories of Dalmatia, to be honest. Right.
the city represented the best practices of those early days in building material, brick. Very little stone or wood was used. Home building and village architecture among the surrounding peoples were greatly improved by the Dalmatian example.
That's what it was built of, brick. Right? That's what they say. Right? Near the prince's headquarters were dwelt all colors and strata of human beings. And it was from these nearby tribes that first students of the Prince's School was recruited. Although these early schools of Dalmatia were crude, they provided all that could be done for men and women of that primitive age. So they taught them to the level they could understand, right? All right.
Hey, Roger.
Yeah.
Sorry, but going back to the brick, you know, it takes kilns for brick. So obviously,
Right.
they had molds and kilns and the right kind of like clay to make
Clay, and back then they used straw to keep the clay together, right?
They use straw for what?
To keep the clay together.
Okay.
That's how
They
the
couldn't
Hebrews
make
did it.
bricks without straw back then, for that area.
Okay,
So the bricks were made out of clay material and straw. Okay, so they basically put them together and they had to fire them somehow. So they had to build kilns. And they had to do that according to the instructions of whom? The Caligasser 100, right?
Yeah, it would have been experienced. And then they had water, apparently.
Yeah, they were right there on the ocean, so they had tons of water. That way.
No, water to lay between cement.
Mortar. Oh, mortar. Yeah, they probably showed them how to make primitive mortar out of something too. I don't know.
Okay, we'll go on.
Who's up? Oh, this is Millie. Millie, you're up.
I think she stepped away.
You there, Millie? There she goes.
Don't turn your speaker on.
I'm back, but I don't know where we are.
Okay, we're at
The Princess Corporeal Staff.
Yes.
yes.
I don't see that.
Yeah, it's 743, paragraph 9.
Anyway, on section 4,
Michael,
No, it's 3A.
early days of the 100.
3A.
the paragraph right before.
I don't see it.
We're in section 3, paragraph 8.
Section 3, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The Princess Corporeal Staff continually gathered about them in superior individuals of the surrounding tribals,
Right.
and their training and inspiring these students sent them back as teachers and leaders of their respective peoples.
Okay, so after they trained them and they gained experience and that sort of thing, they were sent back to their own tribes to teach their own tribes this new information, okay? And by doing it this way, they do it just like they do in the schools of the mansion worlds, right? You learn, you show what you learn by teaching others what you have learned, right? So that's what they were doing, just like they learned in the mansion worlds. All right. Rodney, I think you're up.
Okay, number 4, the early days of the 100. The arrival of Prince's staff created a profound impression. While it required almost 1,000 years for the news to spread abroad, those tribes near the Mesopotamian headquarters were tremendously influenced by the teachings and conduct of the 100 new sojourners on Urantia, and much of your subsequent mythology grew out of the garbled legends of these early days. One of these members of the Prince's staff were repersonalized on Urantia as supermen.
So probably the legends of Greece and things like that, where the gods came down to live among men, this is where this came from, okay? For the legends told year after year after year, generation after generation of these supermen that came down from another planet, right? Repersonalized on our planet. On our planet, I should say.
Does that mean that 4 really existed?
So Thor really existed as a Superman without the hammer, right?
So the Prince's staff, Roger, would be the angelic cooperators.
No, the Prince's staff would be the Caligastia 100 plus the angelic corps.
Right, the Jerusalem Mind volunteers and the angelic
Right.
staff. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Tim, you're up.
The series obstacles.
Serious.
Oh yeah, that's great. The serious obstacles to the good influence of such extraplanetary teachers is the tendency of mortals to regard them as gods. But aside from the technique of their appearance on Earth, the Caligastia 100, 50 men and 50 women, did not resort to supernatural methods nor superhuman manipulations.
So they didn't do anything out of the ordinary to give the locals the impression that they were superhuman,
But
right?
they did look different,
They
so
did
they were
look
impressed
different.
with their,
Yeah. They were impressed with their appearance, right?
How different did they look?
Well, they were probably about 8 foot tall and very huge, Millie. Because of they had artificial bodies, basically, which were created, given human DNA, and then they were encircuited. So they're probably larger size because it's easier to manipulate materials that way. You know, it's kind of like making a Frankenstein. You make him a little bigger so you can get to everything easily. So, all right. I think we're okay.
but the corporal staff were nonetheless superhuman. They began their mission on Urantia as extraordinary threefold beings.
All right. And these were one. When they were corporal and relatively human, for they embodied the actual life plasm of one of the human races, the embodic life plasm of Urantia.
They were corporal. What does that mean?
Mean they were physical, just like we are. We're corporal beings. We're corporal beings.
Okay.
We have blood, flesh, and blood, right? Rodney, I think you're up next.
Okay. These 100 members of the Prince's staff were divided equally as to sex and in accordance with their previous moral status. Each person of this group was capable of becoming co-parental, is that word right?
That's right.
To some new order of physical being, but they had been carefully instructed to resort to parenthood only under certain conditions. It is customary for the corporal staff of the Planetary Prince to procreate their successors sometimes prior to retiring from special planetary service. Usually this is at or shortly after the time of the arrival of the planetary Adam and Eve.
So normally they don't procreate until close to the time of the new Adam and Eve, because they're going to be relieved of duty when the new Adam and Eve shows up, right? So this would have been, what, 300,000 years or 400,000 years
Man, that's a long time.
after their arrival. So they don't do this for a very long time. But what's coming up is very, very interesting. All right, Tim, would you take the next one?
These special beings therefore had little or no idea as to what type of material creature would be produced by their sexual union, and they never did know before the time for such a step in the persecution of their world work. The entire regime was upset by rebellion, and those who later functioned in a parental role had been isolated from the life currents of the system.
Okay, this is very important to understand. The 60 of the Caligastia 100 that rebelled, when they left the Dalmatia, the first garden, they went off to the land of Nod, because Nod was one of the Caligastia 100, right? And they started to mix with the daughters and sons of men. So they started having children with the locals wherever they went. Okay? The difference is here, this is what they're talking about. The difference is because they went into rebellion, they were not encircuited any longer. Right? So they wouldn't create children that were encircuited. Okay? But the interesting thing they're talking about here is they never found out what kind of children they would have had because none of them stayed loyal and was encircuited when they had the children, right? If they would have stayed loyal, stayed another 300,000 years, and they had children while they were encircuited, they would be totally different than any other children on the planet. Because these children would not only have the human DNA and the human-like plasm, they would have the encircuit of the system too. Because they would be children of those beings. You follow me?
Did you say the 100 went out?
No, 60. The 60 that rebelled went out.
The who?
The 60.
The 60 that rebelled.
Yeah.
Okay.
The 60 that rebelled?
Right.
Yeah. The
Right,
60.
and who were the ones that rebelled? The 60?
We're going to cover that next time. We got a whole list of them. Don't ask me
Okay.
to name them.
So in other words,
I got a chart for that.
they did not have any children. Did any of them?
None of them had children, human children, before the rebellion. You got me?
Okay.
What they did have, we're going to learn about in a couple slides, is they had midway creatures.
Yeah, okay, because that was
Yeah.
sex between themselves.
No, that was a Urantia union. It wasn't sex.
Okay.
There is a difference, and they make that clear in the paper.
All right.
Okay? So they did not have sex with each other, period, during this period of time. Though it says they explored at great length their human functioning. So you take that, I'm not going to explain that to you. You have to take that for yourself. All right?
Okay.
So, but they're talking about here they never did find out because they never had children that were encircuited also. Okay? Okay. Who's up?
It's Diane.
Really?
Yeah.
I just read.
Okay,
Yeah.
my turn. In skin color and language, these material... Pardon me?
Go ahead.
In skin color and language, these materialized members of Caligasti's staff follow the Adamic race. They partook of food as did the mortals of the realm, with this difference. The recreated bodies of this group were fully satisfied by a non-flesh diet.
They were vegetarians.
Vegetarians.
Right.
This was one of the considerations which determined their residence in a warm region abounding in fruits and nuts. The practice of subsisting on a non-flesh diet dates from the times of the Caligastia 100, for this custom spread near and far to affect the eating habits of many surrounding tribes, groups of origin in the once exclusively meat-eating evolution.
And what was one of those groups of people that we know are mostly vegetarians? Indians, right? They're close by. So the whole race in India probably picked up this vegetarian diet from the Caligastia.
Hey, Roger, they mentioned skin color.
Yes.
And, you know how it says that these materialized members of Caligastia's staff follow the Adanic race? What color was the Adanic race?
It would be a slight variation of the red race. Kind of more along the line of Eskimo.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's see, I'm up. The 100 were material but superhuman beings, having been reconstituted on Urantia as unique men and women of a high and special order. Okay. Billy, you're up.
Here we go. This group, while enjoying provincial citizenship in Jerusalem, were as yet unfused with their thought adjusters. And when they volunteered and were accepted for planetary service in liaison with the descending orders of sonship, the adjusters were detached. Whoa. But these Jerusalemites were superhuman beings. They possessed souls of ascendant growth during the mortal life in the flesh. These souls is of embryonic estate. It is born, resurrection, as the Urantia life and experience growth through the successive Urantia worlds, and the souls of the Caligastia 100 had these expanded through the progressive experiences of the 7 mansion worlds to the citizenship status on Jerusalem.
Okay, this is very important about the thought adjusters. When you leave a planet and you go on the ascendant pathway through the mansion worlds, you're considered an ascending son of God, right? Sometime in that ascension, as an ascending son of God, you fuse with your adjuster, right? These Caligastia 100 had not done that yet, okay? So they volunteered to come back to a planet, so that made them immediately, when they were accepted, descending sons of God. You got that? And the descending sons of God do not take their own thought adjuster on their missions. Okay? So, point. Lucifer did not have a thought adjuster. Caligastia did not have a thought adjuster. Dalagastia does not have a thought adjuster, right? So the Jerusalemite citizens, when they come back to the planet, were detached from their thought adjusters. Now, what would happen? If they did their mission properly and they were taken back off the planet, they would be reunited with their original thought adjuster again. Okay? So that's why that thought adjuster's detached and left on Jerusalem, because they're working in a role as a descending, not an ascending son of God. Okay? Does that make sense to you all?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
Roger, I really got a lot out of this part about, this is speaking about us as well, that during mortal life in the flesh, our soul is in an embryonic state.
That's right, it is.
But it's actually born in the Urantia life, and we experience growth through successive Urantia worlds.
That's right.
So
That's
in
right.
other words, these individuals were on the order of being super because their souls had already been born and experienced so much.
Yeah, 7 mansion worlds of experience.
World.
Yeah, that could have been millions of years too, Rodney. You think about it.
Again, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? So they're not in the their soul is not in the embryonic state as ours is now, right? They're already a full-fledged soul when they hit the mansion worlds. So yeah, so they should have been able to go through this test in flying colors, right? Because they've been through 7 mansion worlds and probably a million years of experience. So coming down to another planet like this is nothing, really, for them. But that's what makes them supermen and women. Okay. Let's see, Rodney, I think you're up.
All right, I was making a note there. Okay. In conformity, is that the right sentence?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. In conformity to their instructions, the staff did not engage in sexual reproduction, but they did painstakingly study their personal constitutions. and they carefully explored every imaginable phase of intellectual parenthesis mind and Urantia parenthesis soul liaison. And it was during the 33rd year of their sojourn in Dalmatia, long before the wall was completed, that number 2 and number 7 of the Danite group accidentally discovered a phenomena attended on the liaison of their Urantia cells, parentheses, supposedly non-sexual and non-material. And the result of this adventure proved to be the first of the primary midway creatures. This new being was wholly visible to the planetary staff and to their celestial associates, but was not visible to the men and women of the various human tribes. Upon authority of the planetary prince, the entire corporal staff undertook the production of similar beings, and all were successful, following the instructions of the pioneer Danite pair. Thus did the prince's staff eventually bring into being the original core of 50,000 primary midways.
Now this is very important. We're talking about a soul liaison, or a Urantia liaison. So the Urantia being of these creatures, or the Danites, or the Calgasa 100, came together, and this coming together of their souls created the midwayers.
I got a question right here, Roger.
Yeah.
I know when we go to in our next bodies, Urantia form, we are not sex creatures.
That's right.
Now that's the material part. However, perhaps Urantia, we will be able to have offspring. I don't know.
That's possible. That's totally
That's what
possible.
it sounds like to me.
Yeah, because this is how the midwayers were created, right? And it's interesting that the explanation of what a midwayer is that they are creatures that are midway between human and Urantia. Okay? So basically they're caught in the middle between the two.
And they would not receive a thought adjustment.
And they would not receive a thought adjustment. That's correct.
Roger, I thought it was human and angel.
Well, it's human and celestial, really is what it's.
And what does celestial mean? It's
more of a higher level than Urantia. It would be above Urantia, but not totally spiritual yet, you know. And it's hard to explain exactly where that would be, Tim, because really that's kind of where the angels are, is between Urantia and spiritual. You know.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Tim, you're up next.
These mid-type creatures were of great service in carrying on the affairs of the world's headquarters. They were invisible to human beings, but the primitive sojourners at Dalmatia were taught about these unseen semi-spirits, and for ages they constituted the sum total of the spirit world to these evolving mortals.
See how they use semi-spirit there, Tim? So they're kind of in between there somewhere.
So semi-spirit.
Yeah.
Can they like manipulate objects and
Yes,
use
they can.
their force and
Yeah, they can move physical objects. They can make themselves visible. I guess probably with the help of a mechanical controller, they can make themselves visible to humans if they choose to. So the problem with this is this: the rebel midwayers, there were 40,000 of them out of the 50. Only 10,000 of the midwayers stayed loyal. Okay, so 40,000 of them rebelled, and you can imagine.
60,000.
Huh?
60,000 rebelled.
No, 40,000 of the midwayers.
That's right. 60.
Yeah. 40,000 of the midwayers out of the 50,000 rebelled. Okay, and you can imagine a midware doing anything he wanted, so he could appear before these primitive humans and scare the bejeebus out of them, right? They could be dancing around a fire and suddenly a midware appears, or he manipulates the material. This is where the stories of the devils and demons came from. Okay?
So you said that if he wants to manipulate or move an object, he has to have a mechanical controller, he has to have a system?
Not always, no. But if he wants to appear before a human, they may require a mechanical physical controller, because they have to change your sight range to appear, apparently.
So where's that mechanical physical controller at? Is it just standing by him at all times?
Yeah,
or does he have to call
probably.
down?
Yeah, there's thousands of those, so yeah, I'm sure they're available for almost anything. And probably some of them were involved in the rebellion stuff too, I don't know. But the interesting thing is all of our legends of devils and demons and manipulating materials and all that comes from this. Basically, it's the midwayers. And this went on up until what time?
When Jesus was here.
Pentecost, right? It stopped on Pentecost because on the day of Pentecost, all the rebel midwayers were taken away in chains. All of them. So there aren't any rebel midwayers on this planet any longer. Okay? So the things we blame devils and demons on aren't around anymore. Okay? The only evil we have to worry about is human evil, right? All right. Are you with this?
It's my turn. Please. 3. The Caligastia 100 were personally immortal or undying. They are circulated through their material forms, the anecdotal complements of the life currents of the system. And had they not lost contact with the circuits through rebellion, they would have lived on indefinitely until the arrival of the subsequent Son of God, or until their sometime later release to resume the interrupted journey to Havona and Paradise.
So they were here temporarily, serving as a function, and if they would have stayed on course, they would have gone back to their normal journey to paradise, right? Just like everybody else does, right? But they were...
Their bodies would have been dematerialized.
That's right, they were being dematerialized because their bodies were immortal and undying, Rodney. They reconstituted themselves, all right? These anecdotal complements of the Satania life circuits were derived from the fruit of the tree of life, a shrub of Urantia, which was sent to Urantia by the Most Highs of Norlatiadec at the time of Caligasta's arrival. In the days of Dalmatia, this tree grew in the central courtyard of the temple of the Unseen Father. We talked about this. And was the fruit of the tree of life that enabled the material and otherwise mortal beings of the Prince's staff to live on indefinitely as long as they had access to it. So it was the circuit and the fruit from the tree that reconstituted their bodies. This is probably where the legends came from for the Fountain of Youth, right?
Hey Roger, when you say the word circuit, what are you talking about?
Talking about the spiritual circuits of the local universe. It's one of the circuits of the local universe. There's 7 of them. And I don't have that slide available. So.
And what does the word antidotal mean?
It's the antidote to dying, basically. It's an antidote for cellular degeneration, which is what dying is about.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Who just read?
I did.
Diane did.
Okay. Of no value to the evolutionary races, this super sustenance was quite sufficient to confer continuous life upon the Caligastia 100. and also upon the 100 modified Andanites who were associated with them. What are they talking about here? This is important. The Andanites that volunteered their life plasm for these Calagassa 100s were changed when they took out the life plasm. Okay? And they were basically modified at that period of time, which allowed them to benefit from the tree of life.
So somehow their bodies were encircuited?
Somehow their bodies were encircuited, so as long as they served as an associate of one of the Calagassa 100, they would live indefinitely too.
Well, only if they could get to the tree of life.
Pardon?
Only if they could partake of the
That's
tree
right,
of life.
only if they could partake of the tree of life. That's correct. Alright. This is, again, this is probably where the fountain of youth thing came from, right? Okay, Millie, would you take the next one?
Yes. It should be explained that this connection that at the time of the 100 Andanites contributed their human germ plasm to the members of the prince's staff. The life carriers introduced this into their mortal bodies, the complement of the system circuits, and thus they were enabled to live concurrently with the staff, century after century, in defiance of physical death.
And this probably is where the legends of...
Outlander.
Huh?
The Outlander.
Yeah, okay. The legends of men living for thousands of years came from. Alright. Rodney, I think you're up next.
Okay, eventually the 100 Andanites were made aware of their contribution to the new form of their superiors, and these same 100 children of the Andon tribes were kept at headquarters as the personal attendants of the prince's corporal staff.
Because they wanted to stay close so they had access to the tree of life, right?
Eventually, the 100 were made aware of their contribution.
Yeah, in other words, sooner or later they told them because they volunteered to give part of themselves, they were given back a complement of the encircuitment of the system. So as long as they stayed close and ate from the tree, they would live indefinitely.
Did you want to stop there, Roger? Because we have 3 more sections and they're pretty long.
Yeah, let's do that. We'll take up section 5 next time.
And who exactly were the Anodites? Was that the tribes?
That was the tribes. It sure was, Tim. All
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Let's say a little prayer and we'll quit for the evening. Tim, would you like to pray for us tonight?
Would it be okay if I pass?
Yeah, that's fine. How about
Thank
you, Rodney? Rodney, you out there?
Yes.
Would you like to pray?
Okay. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity that we are able to come together to study this revelation, particularly the paper on the Planetary Prince of Urantia. And we hope to carry this to other people to explain it so they may understand. And we do all these things in your name, Father. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us at home. Please come see us again.